Dalton, Riley, Wolves and wagers. 9-3, Ryan. Kick it over to you to start.
Yeah, as of now, first place in the Western Conference. I believe the Bucks ended up taking care of business against the Dallas Mavericks tonight. That was a really nice game, sick game, but Bucks ended up pulling it off, so the Mavs don't jump the Wolves in the standings. So the Wolves will be first place as of the end of the night, which is awesome. That game felt like it took a couple of years off my life, even though it's the 12th game of the regular season. But ugly win, but you'll take them because once again, we've said this a couple times already this year. This is probably a game you drop last season. So it's nice to see some progression there at least, but I still have a lot of things I want to cover as far as things I didn't necessarily love, right? And I know you're probably gonna want to talk about Cat, and we got a ton of stuff to go over. So let's just get into it. I'm going to start with a big section on Rudy Gobert here. I don't love talking about Rudy, but I feel like I need to. The Wolves keep shooting themselves in the foot, and we talked about this or texted about this the last couple games. Why are they going to him in the post so much? Back to the hoop type post touches. It's just not productive. 10-12 in the second quarter. And this actually isn't even a post touch, but Rudy gets an offensive rebound, or he tries to, feels like he was fouled. He goes and complains to the official, leads to a corner three or a wing three, knockdown, lead balloons to 15. That's just an immature thing by Rudy there to start going to complain at that moment to the official to lead to a transition three when you're already down big. But Nah tried to thread the needle to him, which led to a Rudy turnover at the 5:15 mark in the second quarter.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it led to a BI bucket. And then some of it isn't even Rudy's fault. Mike Conley, this was with 8:37 to go in the fourth. He tried to do a little bounce pass to Rudy. It got knocked away. I don't even think it reached Rudy. Turnover led to a Hawkins dunk. And then a game that was just 7 points, you'd gotten it down to it, ballooned back up to 13 a couple possessions after that, mainly from that TO. So it's just not productive going to him in the post. I do have a couple things on how I think we should use Rudy that I really liked from tonight. Early first quarter, this was a great set from Finch, and I'll get into more on Finch tonight too. I want to touch on him some. But Ant starts on the wing, right? Does a little post entry pass to Cat in the mid post, and then Rudy's sitting at the block. So Cat makes a move, drives, does a little lob pass to Rudy for an easy dunk because Valanciunas has to help out on the Cat drive. That's a beautiful set, and it's not complex at all, right? That's pretty elementary stuff as far as, you have your two best players at the wing and at the mid post entered into them, and then Cat can either drive, shoot, or like he did, drive and make a pass, right? So really like that, and that's how they need to use him. And I think they connected for 2 alley-oop dunks today as well. So that's how they should be using him. And then another way, if you do want to use Rudy in the pick and roll, what I saw with 6:40 to go in the third quarter, Ant dishes to Rudy, catches it in the post, and he instantly spins and kicks a pass to Na for a wide open corner three. And that was during their comeback. That wasn't a small play. That's beautiful. Rudy didn't even look at the hoop. He instantly turned because he knew there's going to be backside help and he was going to have a corner wide open. So I think they need to implement that more, and they have at some points during this year. But that's my first little nugget. It was a kind of a long one on Rudy Gobert, but I'll touch on him more in a bit too as we go over the game some more. But that's the main things I noticed.
Yeah, and I'm not going to touch a lot on Rudy, but I am going to touch on Jaden McDaniels a little bit. And the reason why I want to touch on him is $27 million a year and the value for this organization. I mean, his ability to play after double teams, not only for Anthony Edwards, but also Karl-Anthony Towns. Cat brings double teams. You have to double Karl-Anthony Towns when he starts doing what he's doing tonight. You plain and simply have to. So when you have to worry about both those guys and Jaden McDaniels, what was he, 5 for 7?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
12 points.
His mid-range is becoming absolutely a huge part of his game, which is something that has not been. So the fact that Jaden McDaniels is taking this next step now, he does have to work on his fouls. Some of those I think were pretty goofy, to be honest with you. So I still like the aggressiveness picking up BI at half court. Even Ant will talk a little bit, I'm sure about him picking up that foul. But when it comes down to it, Jaden McDaniels is untouchable at this point. He's a big reason. I know he got kind of off to a slow start with the injury, but I still think getting him inked up at $27 million a year is something that Tim Connolly and his organization should be proud of. And then next to Jaden McDaniels. Nas didn't have his best game tonight, Rye, but still getting him at 3 years for $41 million. When you see Rudy Gobert, he's the exact opposite of Rudy Gobert, and you can transition to him any given night. Was kind of the two main points that I wanted to touch on in this game, Rye.
Yeah, I'll start with Nas here, talk about him a little bit. And he's had a good year, right? And we can't talk too much junk about Nas just because of how much he's done and for his contract point and everything. Love it. But not probably his worst game of the year, in my opinion. Only played 19 minutes in a game where Rudy and Cat were both in foul trouble. So in a game when your two bigs are in foul trouble, Nas plays 19 minutes. That kind of shows that he just, when he was out there, he was 2 for 8. I guess I don't know how many, and I think he made his first 2 shots. I think they were both 3-pointers that he sunk, and then I think he missed every shot after that. So not the best game from him. Mike too, he was also 2 for 8, just like him. And then Shake as well was 2 for 8. I know you like Shake. I do too, to a certain extent. I love the signing at least. Still looks like he's trying to find a rhythm. Minus 16 in 16 minutes just isn't going to get it done. We were texting about the 3 he passed up on, and it led to a really awkward looking possession after that where he kind of forced a floater, Cat offensive rebound, dishes it back to him, missed layup, stuff like that. But I mean, he tried to do like a circus layup.
I think he was 2 for 6. Was he 2 for 8 or 2 for 6?
Let me check the box.
Yeah, Shake just had, at times he was unplayable, but there was also a lot of good things that I saw from Shake. And I think he was a big part of that first half, getting it back down to 5 points, especially when the Pelicans started as good as they did. But yeah, overall, Shake was unplayable, and he just has to sit when he's, making bad decisions, which he consistently can do. But he also, I got to give him a little bit of roses. He played some solid minutes there in the first half.
Yeah, he did, and he hit those. I think both of his makes from the field were in the first half on like mid-range jumpers, which were nice to have, especially when the offense was sputtering like it was. It kind of gave them some stability, and I think that's kind of what Finch imagines a Shake Milton role being. Like we've talked about it many times this year, being the supersized Jalen Noel, right? Having the same type of offensive role where Finch just wants him to go get buckets when he's out there. So I like him shooting. I just wish that a couple more of them were going to go in. But if you look at his track record, he's been a good role player for the majority of his career. So I'm not going to really worry too much about a 12-game stretch on a brand new team, right? Just not going to worry about it too much. As far as the rest of the bench, Nah with another good game. I think he had 10 points and 5 assists. A couple of goals, but still, he hit some big shots there in the third and fourth quarter. He had a 5-point stretch on his own, I think, in the fourth, right, with that steal and dunk that ended up rolling in. I've never seen a friendly roll off a dunk in person, I guess. And then he had that 3 on the next possession, I believe it was. So nice game from him. And Kyle, after struggling the last couple games as far as like percentage and forcing shots, 9, 5, and 5, just doing Kyle Anderson things. And I read a tweet, I believe it was by Dane Moore, who said in the first half, Kyle played a 15-minute stretch of straight basketball. And it just kind of felt like Finch needed a lifeline when things were not going to plan at all. And Kyle's just a savvy vet, and they really love his presence out there.
Yeah, I just think Kyle coming from the Spurs, we talked about Marco Bellinelli, and all the other players that the Spurs have produced. He's just a nice player to have on this team, right, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll finish these box scores here. We've touched on Jaden, 5-7 with 12 points. I think you just got to find a way to get him more looks, right? I mean, I think most of those points came in the first half as well. I don't think maybe he didn't even make a shot in the second half. I can't tell you if that's true or not, but need a way to get him more looks, especially when he's being this efficient and playing this good at defense. Even though Brandon Ingram had a nice game as far as like he had 30 points, it was 11 for 24. It wasn't the most efficient night, and he had to work for a lot of those buckets. They weren't freebies outside of a few. Rudy was 17 and 11 with 2 steals and a block. So even though I kind of hated on him for a couple minutes stretch there earlier, overall the box score wasn't too bad. Would have been nice if he would have made one of those free throws at the end there after going 6 of 7 on the night. Gets fouled, tie game, less than 30 seconds left, and he bricks both of them. That's not ideal. But overall, this wasn't a bad Rudy game. The first half I didn't love, but he really kind of was that anchor in the second half that they needed during their comeback stretch, even though he was out for the first part of that stretch. And then Ant, outside of fouling out, 9 for 19, 23 points, 3 boards, 4 assists, plus 13. He led the entire Wolves in plus minus, and he didn't play that many minutes because he fouled out. I think he was 5 of 10 from deep. So pretty good Ant game besides the fouling out. A little immature there. with him continuing to play pressure ball, especially when Ingram was dang near half court. I didn't love that, but I love the competitive edge, and you're never going to take that away from Anthony Edwards. So you can't hate on that too much.
Yeah, I just think the story of the night tonight is different guys at different times for the Wolves. I mean, outside of probably Mike Conley, Nah had a stretch. Even Nas had a stretch. We talked about Milton in the first half. Kyle had a stretch where he had a couple nice takes. And then obviously you start talking about the superstars. I mean, Anthony Edwards kind of started that run when he knocked down those back-to-back threes. Cat doing his thing at the end of the game, and especially taking advantage at the end of the first half with his size. So I just think it was different guys at different times, and this team is so deep. I think that's going to help, obviously, in the regular season, but also in the playoffs, getting all of these guys who have the experience, especially a guy like Milton with the 76ers, Conley with the Grizzlies, Kyle with the Spurs and with the Grizz. These guys are going to be valuable pieces, and they need to continue to make big shots for the Wolves.
Yeah, I agree. I think they are a deep team. Troy Brown Jr. was a guy who started a ton of games for the Lakers last year, and he's currently not even on rotation, right? So he can fill in when there's injuries or players get a night off, stuff like that. So it is nice to have a bit of that depth and stability out of your bench unit, because that's normally where, when people are out, that's normally what takes the biggest hit. It's not your starting lineup, it's your bench, because you normally slide your best player from the bench into the starting lineup, but then the bench becomes pretty suspect. So can't complain about the depth at all. Tim Conley, who we did an episode on yesterday, he did a great job filling out this roster. Now I'm going to talk about Finch, which I think this was actually his worst game of the year. And there's some Wolves fans out there who want him fired and are like parading for Finch to be fired. That's not what stable organizations do. And he has a great relationship with Anthony Edwards. And that's what really matters, is Ant loves him. He coaches Ant really hard, and that's the way Ant wants to be coached. You're not just going to swap coaches, especially when you're 9-3 to start the year, and he's led them to the playoffs in his first 2 full seasons. So I think that's a bit ridiculous to call for his head, but there was some things that I didn't love. After Ant's 4th foul, which was halfway through the 3rd quarter, it looked like Cody Zeller, and shout out to Cody Zeller, he actually had a pretty nice game, but it looked like Cody Zeller was moving a bit, or might have even been in the restricted area. That's probably where you just got to use your challenge. And it happened, I think, in 2 other games earlier this year as well. Ant was in foul trouble. Finch didn't use a challenge that they probably would have won that would have kept Ant in the game. And he also did it with Cat earlier this year. I don't know if that's just because every time they foul, it seems every Wolf is asking for Finch to review it, so he doesn't know when to actually review it and when not to. But I still wish he would protect his stars a little more and at least show them that he's trying to like get the whistle in their favor and at least trying to keep them on the floor. Because Ant didn't play that many minutes tonight in the game that was really, really close, and they had a full day rest. And then from Jake Painting, who's got a great Twitter page on following the Wolves, he said early in the game, this one is very close to being over. The Wolves live on a knife's edge. The defense needs to be elite, and because Finch's offense is really, really bad, they need Ant or Cat going supernova. If you get either of those things, they're going to be blown out. If you get neither of those things, they're going to get blown out. Just kind of wanted to hear what you thought on that. And do you think Finch's offense is bad?
Yeah, and obviously the defense, I think, is going to be able to travel. And I think we have to look at a game like tonight. No Zion. I think if Zion plays, this is probably a 15, 20-point blowout for the Pelicans at home. But outside of that, you look at the Pelicans tonight. I mean, B.I. had 30. Giannis had 26. And then you had 6 guys in double figures, and you still win this game on the road. I think that's where a lot of the defense lies. But yeah, I think we're putting way too much pressure on a guy. And obviously Anthony Edwards and Carl Towns, 2 all-NBA players. And I know Ant hasn't been an all-NBA player yet, but he will be, let's be honest. When you have a guy like Jaden McDaniels, especially, you got to get some ball movement, and you got to trust in your shooters. You got to trust that Mike is going to make those shots. He did, obviously, in the clutch last time we talked about him. Tonight, he did not, but he got bailed out. He's going to knock down those open threes, guys. I'm not worried about it. So move it around, kick it around, and trust these experienced guys to knock shots in. And Shake Milton has to be one of those guys. I mean, from beyond the arc, he is, almost been on Ben Simmons level here. He has a nice mid-range, but he has to be able to knock down those threes if we're moving the ball around. because I would rather have, at this point, an Anthony Edwards contested step back three than an open Shake Milton three. So it's kind of a issue where, yes, you want to go to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. I get that, Finch, but you still have to move the ball, and it's only going to help your team later down in the season when you're fighting for a 4 seed or a 5 seed. When you need Cat and Ant down the stretch, use the guys while you got them. Use Jaden McDaniel. 7 shots when you knock down 5 of them. Geez, come on. Get that guy more involved in the game.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be an issue that's around all season long, is the shooting loads, because obviously Ant and Cat are both really good shooters. I know Cat hasn't had the greatest start. He was 2 of 2 from deep tonight. That's going to correct over time, as the sample size gets bigger. He's, historically, obviously, arguably the greatest big man shooter of all time. But outside of them, they just really don't have a lot of shooters, especially high volume ones. So they just don't shoot that many threes. And tonight, at least, like in the first half, when the Pelicans seem to make every three, it's tough to keep up with a team who's making threes at that high of a rate when you're just not shooting as many as them, or even close to as many as them. And that's a problem. So I wonder if Tim uses some of his second round picks he's acquired to go and try and trade for a guy. I don't know who it would be. First name that kind of comes off the top of my head that would be gettable would be Danilo Gallinari in Washington, because they should be looking to just package out anybody for, really any sort of pick package. But he's a 4, so do you really need another big man is the question. So maybe you go find a guard. That's why I like Matt Ryan on the team, even though he didn't really shoot it the greatest when he was a Timberwolf. Yeah. But tonight, he shot pretty dang well. He was taking heat check threes, so he was feeling it. But I'm kind of surprised they let go of him, considering he's known as a shooter, and it cost you hardly anything, and he had a G League spot or a 2-way or whatever. So kind of surprised to let go of him, but I would think that would be the one move this team really wants to address at the deadline, would be adding a shooter.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that being the issue right now in the regular season, because you can go get shooters pretty much anywhere. No offense to Matt Ryan, but you can go pick that guy up off the street. And I don't know who that is exactly right now off the top of my head, like you mentioned. And that's something that we'll dive into more as we kind of get more to the trade deadline and we start figuring out, okay, who's tanking, who's actually competing for a play-in. And it comes down to it. The Timberwolves should not and hopefully will not be in the play-in, right? And that's what it comes down to, is we have to be able to be a top 6 team with all of this talent. So I think we can go into the deadline, we can go get shooting, and now that solves a lot of the problems. But Hawkins would be a phenomenal guy to get on this team, but obviously I don't think the Pels are giving him up, right?
Yeah, and I'll spend a little bit here talking about that Pelicans team, because like you said, Ingram had 30. Valanciunas always seems to have big games against the Wolves. I think I texted you how come he turns into prime Hakeem every time he plays us. But outside of those two, it was just a group effort. Herbert Jones knocked down 3 threes. But Dyson Daniels really surprised me, because I don't think I've ever seen him play. I've tuned into a few Pelicans games this year, and he wasn't in the rotation much last year, so I just haven't seen him play a lot. That floater was nasty. I think he hit 4 of them in the entire game, and it was just pure. They were like rainmakers coming through. So nice game from him. And like you said, Jordan Hawkins, that guy turning into a flamethrower, looks to be a really good rookie for them. So they got a nice squad over there. But about halfway through the third quarter, I texted you, and we'll maybe end with this, unless you have more to add. I texted you that I might have a hot take.
Yes. Yeah, I got nothing else, so let's end on this.
So I don't know how hot it is anymore. It's still going to turn some heads maybe, just because of the way the game turned out. But I texted you about halfway through, and I said, this might be a hot take, but I still think I think it's getting to the point again where Karl Anthony Towns is the best player on this team. I love Anthony Edwards. We both do. Very, very fun. But over the last couple games, and maybe it's just because Ants had 3 kind of bad games in a row, even though tonight wasn't too bad. But Karl Anthony Towns, they get blown out by probably 40 without him in this game. And so it just seems to me that he's finding, it looks for the first time since, what would that be, the 2021 season when he was All-NBA third team. It looks to be like he's back to that player compared to the injured player from last year.
Yeah, no, I think regular season, there is for sure an argument on who would you rather have for 82 games in a regular season. But playoffs,
Not a question.
It's just, yeah. So the way Cat's playing, absolutely. I mean, I used to love the young Cat who would attack the rim and then he would stretch the floor. Now, as he's kind of transitioned injuries, more play behind the arc, but when he can take it to the rim and then he knocks down threes, he's unguardable. I mean, he's 7 feet tall. He's unguardable. Where Anthony Edwards can, he's obviously, one of the most explosive guards in this game, but he's a guard. He's a 6'4" guard. I mean, you can't do the same things as a 7-footer can, especially with some of these mismatches with Zion being out and Jonas being in foul trouble. This was a Cat game. So Cat needs to be able to do this. If he wants to be considered a super max player, he's getting, a lot of M's, but I think he deserves it. And I think right now I would not change a lot on this roster besides the point of adding some more shooting. And if that's the only complaint we got for the Wolves right now, I am happier than a clam, because there was a lot of times when you would look up and down this Wolves roster and be like, what isn't there to fix? So the fact that we can point to one thing, I'm really excited. And Finch is not a problem, Ryan, in my opinion. I think there might be better coaches out there, but when it comes down to it, like you said, culture, new ownership, you have a new face of your franchise. And Cat is still, I consider him a face of a franchise. If he was traded to Washington, he would still be a face of the franchise in the NBA. He'd be an all-NBA player. But when you have two guys, 1A and 1B, and one's the guard and one's a forward, you can't complain. It's just Rudy Gobert cannot start falling down the spiral. And I think Nas too, because we've seen Nas go on stretches where he's unplayable. And this was another game, like you mentioned, where Nas should be dominating as well. And we didn't see that from him. So got to give my roses to Cat. Love that you're really giving him his roses, because he's a big part of this organization. He has been for almost a decade now. That is crazy to think that there was a time when a lot of people wanted Jahlil Okafor over Karl Anthony Towns. And
I'll put my hand up. I'll put my hand up. I'd watch that tournament run, and I was like, come on, Ja, we're taking you.
Thank the goodness that's not the case, and we don't have to sit here. I'm just happy to have Cat on the roster, and he's the reason we got this win. And I think this erases the Raptors' loss, not the Hawks' loss, but the Raptors' loss on the road against a very winnable team, especially with Zion being out. And when they play this good and you still walk away with a win, the Pelicans got to be scratching their head saying, Minnesota is legit. I mean, we've seen them twice now. We've been missing Zion, but we played really good basketball. I mean, like you said, Dyson Daniels. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of performances from him, like, at all this season. Not trying to, take a shot at the guy, but let's be real here. You don't want him to be a consistent piece on your playoff roster. And I don't think the Pelicans are a playoff team. So huge win for the Wolves, moving to 9-3. Like Riley said, best record in the West after the Bucks took care of the Mavs in that crazy game. But stay tuned. Appreciate you guys as always.